postpartum depression. Postpartum depression. So we need everybody's help to be able to help the mothers. No, yung pandemic talaga, it surfaced so many problems, especially for newly delivered mothers. No, next slide, please. Okay, for the breastfeeding counselors here, sige nga, show of hands. Proud, wave your, wave your flag proudly, no? Sabi natin, hindi lamang po tayo teachers, no? What we need is to be able to empower mothers to be able to build their own confidence kasi we can't be with them 24 hours, no? So breastfeeding counselors need to be able to build the mother's confidence in herself. Breastfeeding counselors need to be trained to deliver accurate information. Hindi haka-haka or hindi sabi-sabi lang, no? Kailangan accurate information. They have to ensure consistent guidance and support during breastfeeding. And of course, even for breastfeeding or lactation medicine, breastfeeding counselors need to know who to refer to. These are health issues, just as complicated as other health issues of postpartum women, and ensure that the mother is supported in so many other ways. Yung tinatawag na warm circle of support, no? Paternal support, support from the family. Are her household chores still being done by herself, or is somebody supporting her even for mundane things like washing her own underwear, cooking, combing her hair, bathing, etc. Next slide. Okay, so sabi natin, and I'm just going over some of the more common or persistent problems that we encounter na nire-report ng mga mothers themselves, no? Meron pong nagsasabi pa rin na umpisahan daw ang solids bago mag 6 months. Tama po ba yon o hindi?
Tama.
Mali, no?
Ay, mali.
If solids are started at less than 6 months, then that is automatically called suboptimal breastfeeding because solids have been introduced too early, and we know that the supply and demand system that the breastfeeding has developed will be compromised, no? Kasi pinasukan ng solids, mabubusog sa solids at wala nang appetite for breast milk and breastfeeding, no? So breastfeeding or breast milk feeding is displaced, and what happens in what ensues is a low supply of nutrients, no? Yung inumpisahan na early solids, kadalasan sobrang labnaw, tama po ba? No? Ang complementary solids hindi dapat tumutulo. Dapat dumidikit sa kutsarita, sa kutsara. If you see lugaw na tumutulo, then alam mo na kulang na yun sa nutrient density. Masyadong malabnaw, no? The infant's nutritional needs will not be met, and alam na po natin, ang uwi, it will be undernutrition or wasting, no? When breastfeeding is not being carried out properly, mas maaga na bubuntis ang mga mothers, no? Yung tinatawag na lactation amenorrhea method, which us as NGOs, we can support the mothers with. We can also just guide them. Madali lang sabihin actually, sa daytime, hindi dapat bababa sa every 4 hours ang pagitan ng breastfeeding for lactation amenorrhea to work. Dapat hindi how do you say, no longer than 4-hour intervals ang daytime feeds, and at night, hindi dapat longer than 6 hours ang pagitan for lactation amenorrhea to work. If you're breastfeeding your baby too infrequently, dadating yung bends at saka magiging fertile lang mas maaga, okay? So that's a simple message that we can help them with, no? And of course, when breastfeeding is lost, you lose immunoprotective factors, no? Yung mga sangkap ng breast milk na tumutulong sa paglaban ng pneumonia, diarrhea, etc. And even the increased risk for allergies no, na poprotektahan ng breast milk. Next slide, please. And then of course, these are more topical issues, no, yung tinatawag na first-line breastfeeding. First line kasi simpleng problema lang, like problems with positioning and attachment. Yung second line, yan na yung may troubleshooting na nagaganap, no? Yung meron ng abscesses or mastitis, at kailangan na ng antibiotics or other interventions, no? Next slide, please. The importance of peer support groups, no? Very, very important, no? Ang mga Pedia, ang mga OB, ang mga midwives, hindi 24 and 7 ang coverage sa komunidad. Tama po ba? No? Hindi sila matawagan ng 2 in the morning kung kailan hirap ng dumede. No? But there are other sources of information and counseling, and these are our best friends, no? Yung ating best friends na kadalasan mas available kaysa yung mas specialized na health workers, no? So yung peer support, ibig sabihin, ka-level na support, especially from mothers who have themselves already breastfed. Ang galing pong support noon, ano? Lalo na kapag yung mother ay trusted niya, yung kanyang breastfeeding counselor. Pedias, kadalasan sa amin, mga authority figure ang tingin sa amin, no? Yung mga sobrang, yun, authority. Next slide. Okay, so like I already mentioned, yung practical support is what we need, no? Next slide, please. And the provision of social safety nets. This is the data, no? Kulang na kulang pa rin ang ating breastfeeding rates, no? Especially among infants under 6 months of age, no? This is the data from, I believe this is NMS, National Nutrition Survey. Over the first 6 months of life, talagang pagtuntong ng 6 months, ng 5 months, kung kailangan exclusive breastfeeding pa rin, only 1 in 3 5-monthers are still exclusively breastfeeding. Sayang po, sayang, it's a waste talaga. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, so for the immunization schedule, nandyan po yan sa inyong mother and baby books. Most of the mother and baby books, especially of our DOH, nandyan po yan. If you want, we can take a picture. Pero napaka-importante po nito, although I'm just asking you to take a picture, no? Evidence nito is yung pertussis outbreak, yung Tuspirina outbreak that has surfaced in Quezon City and so many areas, no, Cebu. Ito yung tinatawag na National Immunization Program. Ito yung compulsory or mandatory vaccinations that every infant should be subjected to, no, para maprotektahan sila against these childhood illness. So please do take a picture. What can an NGO do? If you have to help a family bring their babies, no, to the health center, then that's what we have to do. Next slide, please. Okay, sabi natin, breastfeeding is not only immunoprotective, it's not only nutrition, but it is also a bonding journey, no? And how many of you have breastfed po? How many of you breastfed multiple children? Na-compare nyo ba ho yung breastfed at hindi? Sorry, parang nag-create ako ng ng konting Pero meron nagsasabi na mas malapit sila dun sa mga breastfeed nila. Tama po yun? I think that's a natural human tendency, no? Kasi iba talaga yung effect ng pagbe-breastfeed on the mother and infant interaction, no? Iba talaga. And even the fathers, no? Meron na overflow na nararamdaman, especially sa oxytocin that happens in breastfeeding, no? And I don't need to read this slide anymore, yung cognitive development, no? Cognitive, what we mean is learning, di ba? The ability, the speed at which a child can learn, is the cognitive capacity of a child. Next slide, please. We have government programs that DOH has the integrated management of childhood illnesses. Dati ko tinuturo ito ng very intensively I think we need to push DOH to resume the IMCI program kasi this IMCI program empowers community volunteers and health workers to be the ones to detect the danger signs in these children, no? At least for the most common childhood illnesses like pneumonia and gastroenteritis. Next slide, please. Operation Timbang, strictly speaking, quarterly, strictly speaking, kung kailan sinusukatan ang mga bata, house to house, yan, sa komunidad, ng timbang ng height or length. And in our acute malnutrition program, we also teach them how to do the circumference nitong mid-arm. Sinusukat yung muscle mass ng mid-arm to detect wasting or loss of muscle mass. Next slide. Ang actively gumaganap sa Operation Timbang are our community volunteers, our BNSs. Nandito po kayo, no? Mga bayani kayo, please give our BNSs a big hand. No? So close to nothing in compensation, grabe po ang ginagawa nila. Next slide. And simple sana, simple IEC materials like what can you feed kapag ang anak mo ay marunong na umupo? Kapag gumagapang na siya, ano yung pwedeng ipakain in terms of consistency? Anong pwedeng ipakain kapag naglalakad na siya? No? So, dapat simple and operational from a mother's point of view. No? And of course, the 5 food groups, dapat ang slide na ito is just to convey the message of simplicity and conciseness in our nutrition guidelines. Next slide. Nako, malaking problema pa rin ito ng NNC, no, Jomay? Napapakain, pero pare-pareho ang kinakain, no? Yung tinatawag na minimum dietary diversity is yung pagkakaiba-iba ng kinakain at yung meals na binibigay sa family table, no? So that's one of the indicators of proper nutritional practices is the minimum dietary diversity. We're still failing, no? Shortcoming pa rin natin ito. Lots of education still needed. Next slide is minimum meal frequency. Nakalagay din po dyan, kung breastfed, dapat kumakain na ng 2 beses sa maghapon yung 6 to 8 month old. Kung 9 to 23 month old siya, dapat 3 beses na kada araw kumakain. At kung 6 to 23 months old, dapat ang formula fed ay 4 times ng kumakain sa bawat araw. No? So there's a minimum meal frequency that we have to monitor that indicates how well we are implementing our nutritional practices. And lastly, yung tinatawag na, next slide please, yung minimum acceptable diet. No? So marami pa tayong educational campaigns na kailangan because we're faltering in all these 3 indicators of nutritious diets. Next slide. More statistics on continued breastfeeding. Sabi natin dapat after 6 months of life, tuloy pa rin. At after 2 years of age, kung kontrata nila ng mag-ina, ay gusto pa rin nilang sumuso, bakit hindi? Wala tayo pakialam dyan. Kasi usapan nila nangangagat, pero kung gusto ka rin ng bata, then that's a mother and baby contract that needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. Just some pictures of socio-culturally appropriate feeding plans, no? And presentation, di ba? Yung mga nanay, kapag sobrang parang linagay lang sa plato at walang kalatoy-latoy ang presentasyon. Ito parang tumatawang pati yung appetite ng bata, no? So the presentation of the food, the colors have a different connotation, ano? If you have orange and yellow, ano kayang vitamin yun? Vitamin A, no? Kalabasa, carrots, etc. No? Pag green and leafy, yan, nandyan ang green. Pag violet, nandyan din ang ube, nandyan din ang eggplant. Ano pa? So the brighter the colors on your plate, the better. No? Nandyan yung variety. Next slide, please. And of course, yes, our other staples. No, ang sabi nga, eat the bahay kubo. Pero marami ding gulay na wala sa bahay kubo. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, as NGOs, what can we do? And this is not a laundry list of what we can do with creativity and a lot of coordination with the barangays. Talagang ang bawat isa po sa atin, I believe, can contribute to this predicament that we're in. Ano? Next slide, please. When we did a survey together with the Philippine Institute of Development Studies, or PIDS, no? Nag-interview po kami ng mga ibang barangay health workers and barangay health officials. Ang isang finding po namin is that they don't necessarily know how to draft a barangay nutrition action plan. So, especially if your NGO has some technical expertise organic to your organization, tulungan ho natin sila. Minsan, hindi lang sila marunong mag-prioritize or they don't know how to actually budget the programs, projects and activities that they want to carry out. No? Even if they may have additional funding from the Mannanas ruling, baka hindi pa rin po sila komportable sa pag-draft at pag-monitor and evaluate ng kanilang BNAP or the Barangay Nutrition Action Plan. So this is one area that we, as technical experts, can possibly help our barangays. Next slide. Yan ho yung findings namin. May awareness ng PPAN or the Philippine Plan of Action for Nutrition, pero hindi necessarily nakakababa to the ground level locus of implementation, which is the barangay, no? So may konting spillover lang, let's say, from the municipality, pero kulang pa rin po ng actual hands-on and lalo na ownership of the PPAs, the projects, plans and activities. Next slide, please. So how to prioritize, how to plan, what local practices can be engaged or implemented para ma-champion talaga nila yung nutrition. Ano? This is where variably yung barangay may expertise. Ano? So kadalasan kailangan pa rin tulungan. Next slide. Yung pag-budget, nabanggit ko na, yung pag-allocate ng health workers, no? At saka yung sometimes with the local barangay elections na di-disenfranchise yung trained ng barangay health workers, no? Na etchepwede na sila kasi hindi sila kapartido or something, no? So these are some of the political repercussions, no, ng local elections. Next slide. Okay, so this is a sample template for an ordinance to localize or to help implement Republic Act 11148. So siguro take a picture na lang po. This is a template outline for an ordinance that might help the barangays implement their various 11148 projects and activities. No? Okay, what can NGOs do? Pwede tayong tumulong sa demand-side interventions. Ibig sabihin, go on radio, advertise, no? What the services are that our health facilities should be providing, no? Create the demand, increase the demand by going on mass media, support supply-side interventions. Ibig sabihin nito, help build the capacity. May skills pa rin na kailangan for breastfeeding counseling. May skills pa rin kailangan for unang yakap. May skills pa rin kailangan for early child care and development. There are programs for early literacy. Anong ibig sabihin po? You can help donate books that are appropriate for age and teach barangay health workers how to read. How to read to these young children so that reading with comprehension rates improve, no? Pwedeng nagbabasa, pero hindi pala naiintindihan, no? So these are fairly simple interventions that NGOs can undertake, no? So para mag-improve yung educational capacity and of course the feeding and nutrition of our poor families, no? Sample project sa Dulag, Leyte, Dr. Cursino there in the pictures. Actually, sinaturate niya ang 45 barangays ng municipality ng Dulag sa pagturo ng breastfeeding at unang yaka. The impact has been wonderful, has been very convincing. Tumaas yung exclusive breastfeeding rates, bumaba ang neonatal mortality, at yung komplikasyon, yung mga complications of formula feeding in those barangays. The report will be submitted soon to the American Academy by May 31. Tapos na po yung project. But we hope to create a cohort study from the 400 or so birth cohort that were delivered in Dulang over the 3 years. Next slide, please. Next slide. Latch Los Baños, is there anyone from Latch? No, yung mother or peer counselor support group. This was during the pandemic na nag-organize sila ng mga feeding packs, food packs, no? Anong napapansin nyo sa food packs nila?
Maraming gulay.
Maraming gulay, local produce, no? Walang milk formula dyan, okay? Merong IECs, may information and educational materials there so that mothers can initiate and sustain breastfeeding practices. Pero natulungan pati yung mga magsasaka ng Los Baños in this manner, no? Next slide, please. Recently, Latch Los Baños, because Los Baños is a very academic town, college town po yan, nakipag-coordinate po sila sa gender center ng Los Baños at nag-training ho ng mga barangay nutrition scholars from all over the province of Laguna, what specifically on how to set up a woman, infant, and children-friendly space kung sakaling magka-evacuation center sa kanilang lugar dala ng disaster. No? So it was a very specific training opportunity organized with the Gender Center. Next slide, please. Rowie Rizala. Where is Rowie? Nasa likod. Okay, si Rowie ay nanay po ng kambal. Okay? And her breastfeeding journey was very eventful because her twins were very premature. But she succeeded, and now she is paying it forward. So an NGO need not go down and physically go to the barangay. You can help online, no? Rowie, no, she's helping mothers of multiples, kung tawagin, twins, triplets, quadruplets, and she's helping with her real life experiences in breastfeeding, with her practical and experiential support, no? Palakpakan natin si Rowie. Next slide. So it doesn't have to be hands-on at the grassroots. You can go online and help. But the important thing is you give accurate information as you train and help these mothers. Next slide, please. Hindi na siguro ito, statistics pa, but one forgotten message is that breastfeeding protects mothers too. Okay, the longer the duration of breastfeeding, the higher the protection against reproductive cancers like ovarian and breast cancers, no? So hindi lang puro ito sacrifice and I have to breastfeed my baby for his or her sake, but it also protects mothers too, and we tend to falter there, no? With that message. The World Health Organization, the steward of health all over the world, no, nag-publish ng second report nila on exploitative marketing practices exhibited by the dairy industry. Next slide, please. And thus, breastfeeding needs protection too. Breastfeeding mothers need to be protected from these marketing practices, need to be protected from marketing messages that undermine their own confidence in their own capacities to nurture their young. Next slide. Locally, we have the EO 51, which is a national law that was enacted into law by then President Corazon Aquino, who at that time had both executive and judiciary powers. So it is a national law, no? So the indiscriminate distribution of milk formula and related products is dangerous, downright dangerous. These were taken in the Villamor Air Base after Super Typhoon Yolanda hit, and we had to talk to the donors, no? Very, very well intentioned and very, very open. And all we needed to do was to explain to them why the distribution of these formula products was dangerous. And they very readily gave up the products, and we exchanged them with safer products to give out, no? Mga cloth diapers, etc. Next slide, please. So please, now that you are coming into the system as NGOs to help feeding and nutrition, you are considered part of the health system, and therefore you should not be soliciting nor accepting products that are covered by Executive Order 51, basically artificial milk powders, bottles and teats that are prohibited from marketing by EO 51. Next slide. Gifts of any sorts, no? Gifts of any sort, no? That tend to undermine the messaging that we want for mothers that need accurate information. Next slide. The first 1,000 days law, I'd like to also emphasize that Objective G in RA 11148 states that we should be considering the recommendations of World Health Assembly Resolution 69.9 that emphasize that we should eliminate cross-promotion. Okay, we should eliminate cross-promotion. Next slide. What does that mean? Marketing products, for example, emphasize something 1 and then 2 and then 3, because you're in effect marketing a sequence of products that that mothers will tend to use, no, or follow the sequence, no. The WHA and the WHO have already stated that growing up, follow through milk formulas are unnecessary. They are unnecessary. Next slide, please. This is Dr. Donna Capili, who lectured here on May 11, who was actually there in Geneva in that year, 2018, when the WHA Resolution 69.9 was enacted by the almost 200 United Nations countries. Next slide. And these are some of the resolutions, and I don't think I have time enough to read through all of them, but you can take a picture if you're interested, but basically, no to cross-promotion. No? You're marketing one, like the follow-through formula, but actually nadadamay yung use ng formula for younger children. Next slide. So these are picture examples of cross-promotion where the formula products are sequenced, no? 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Next slide. Other recommendations, like the milk industry should not create conflicts of interest in health facilities or throughout the health systems, which we all here are now a part of. Next slide. Okay, and use of some of these artificial milk formulas, especially those with added sugar and added fat, no, are also exposing us to the double risk, no, to the dangers of overnutrition. We have data from the National Nutrition Survey that the incidence of overweight in lactating mothers is already on the rise. Okay, so feeding formula to breastfeeding mothers is exposing them to the risk of overweight and obesity. Next slide. I'd like to end, I beg your indulgence, with a story of Ruel. Believe it or not, how old do you think this baby is in these pictures? I didn't cover the baby's eyes anymore because he has come out on YouTube already in a major news program. Sadly, the baby in this picture is already 2 years of age. And in the pictures, he is wasted. Ibig sabihin po, butot, balat. Pero ang kaya lang po niyang gawin ay gumapang. Ang paggapang ay 5 at 6 month milestone. Hindi po yan appropriate sa 2-year-old na. No? Next slide, please. We were able to track the mother down together with UNICEF Dr. Andrew Buku. And I am showing the pictures not to para hindi po para magyabang, kundi para i-illustrate yung power ho ng barangay. Okay? After about 6 months of nutritional rehab using known interventions that we use for wasting, ayan na po si Rowell sa picture sa kanan, no? And if you would train your eyes onto the man that's standing at the second row of the picture, may mama ho dyan sa second row. Kita niyo po, nakaputi, Okay. Guess ho kung anong profession niya. Part ho siya ng barangay team. At siya ho yung kinoconsider naming savior ni Ruel. Siya po ay isang sanitary engineer. Hindi ho siya BHW, hindi po siya BNS, pero motivated siya at mahal niya yung bata at siya po yung nagdala ng weekly supply ng pagkain para ma-rehabilitate si Ruel. No? So, anyone who has some training but has the heart and the motivation to do so, to save lives, can be part of these teams. And I'm sure each one of us here are of that nature. Next slide, please. Pero may sad story lang po kami na gustong ma-illustrate dito. By the time we were able to return to Ruel at 3 years of age, dinalahan po namin siya ng maliliit na libro. Sadly ho, yan yung first ever books na nahaplos niya ever in his whole life. At ang mas malungkot po dyan ay at 3 years of age, kahit ho ang weight niya ay nasa normal na, wala pa rin po siyang salita. Hindi pa po siya nagsasalita. So, what am I trying to drive across? 2 messages siguro po. Timeliness. Mag-intervene ho tayo ng mas maaga. Mag-work ho tayo ng mas maaga sa life ng mga bata ito. And number 2, appropriateness. Ano po yun? Yung mother kasi na interview ko, she was a very loving mother. She delivered Ruel at 3.5 kilos. Normal ho weight yun, no? And she was exclusively breastfeeding him, but at one point in time, kapag meron silang extra money ng konti, bibili sila ng lata ng formula. Kasi yan ho ang napapakinggan niya sa TV at sa radyo. Pero hindi ho nila kayang tustusan yun ng pangmatagalan. So by 2 years of age, butot balat na ho si Ruel. So, 2 message lang po, timeliness and appropriateness. Sundin po natin kung ano yung rekomendasyon ng health authorities natin kasi napag-aralan po yan sa evidence-based medicine, etc. And yun na lang po. Thank you very much for your time.